So my name is George Foster. I was born in American Samoa, and I moved to California back in 1974 with my family. And growing up there in Compton, California, it was a rough upbringing due to the Compton is not very known as a good neighborhood, but it taught me a lot about life, that life is not fair and there are craziness in this world, but also there is beauty in the world as well. So growing up there, I never realized that I would ever join the military. I graduated from high school in 1984 in Little High School. That high school is famous for Weird Al Yankovic graduating from there. And but I graduated from there in 84. It didn't dawn on me to join the military till 3 years after in 87. And my mom and dad were having bad luck in finances. And so I wanted to help my family out, especially my dad. I wanted him to buy him a nice pickup truck, to get around with. And so I decided to join the military in 87. And when I joined the military, my family had a great get together and said goodbye to me. And my last words that my dad spoke to me in person at the airport was, "If I don't ever see you again, I will see you in heaven." Now, I didn't know that that was going to be the last time I see him. But in 87, in February, I joined the military and I began my military career in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and as a carpenter and masonry specialist. And it was one of the weirdest things because I've never been away from my family, especially my parents. I was always a homebody and both a mommy and daddy's boy. But I said I had to pursue this to help them. Well, on my first year in, things did not go very well in my family. The first year in 87, we lost our pet cat, family cat, and it was like everybody was sad because of the family cat. Later on that year, I went to the military in February, like I said, and it was kind of tragic to my parents because I was the one who was always helping them at the time. I had, say, 10 siblings, including me would be 11. And my older siblings were already out of the house, but there were about 6 or 7 of us left. So I was the one that was mostly helping out my parents in terms of translating English stuff to our native tongue. But other than that, we were living on the welfare. And so when I went in February, I didn't come back home till July. June, after basic training IIT. Came back home and my dad wasn't there. He went to New Zealand on some ministry stuff for the church. And so I didn't get to see him. And then I went to my first permanent duty station was in Germany, Karlsruhe, Germany. And I went there on July 4th. I remember that time because I went there and it was the first time I've ever seen the sun set after 10 o'clock at night in Germany. So it was a weird experience for me ever to be a first permanent duty station. And it was a great time too because I got to travel. I've never been to Europe before and it was a great experience. The Autobahn, the culture, the food and everything was different. And also with my fellow soldiers, male and female, it was a all new experience, being in the military, seeing the world from a different viewpoint if you had not went away from the States. But I also realized when I started touring there was we take a lot of advantages that we have here in the United States. And what I mean by that is the freedom that we have and a lot of stuff that other countries don't. And that's one of the things I began to appreciate about the United States is that we have so much freedom that many people take advantage of that we do not have when we go overseas. And certain things that they did overseas also, I noticed that were different, were especially in Germany, recycling was a very strong thing, and um, upkeeping house, they threw away certain things certain time of the year. And most of us, a single military soldier would go dumpster diving, get some of these stuff, because some of these stuff are pretty brand new that they throw out, but they don't need it due to I guess they only have supposed to have a certain amount of stuff in their household or something. Well, of course, we took advantage of it and bought it and fixed our little apartments with it. Well, um, September in '87, my dad passed away, and when he came back from New Zealand to California, and I felt his death all the way from California to Germany, where I was at. I'm 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 an actor. I love being an actor, and I used to do. I got a chance to be in my uh, play lead in my high school musical, West Side Story. And so when we did a play in Germany, I was supposed to be at the play at 14, 1400. And I was still trying to get my military timing. Well, I didn't show up till like 4. And I showed up and they said, you were supposed to be here 2 hours ago. So what do you mean? I thought it was 1400. Yeah, 1400 was 2 o'clock. And it didn't dawn on me. And I said, I've been walking around not too far from here all this time. They said, well, you were supposed to be here 2 hours ago. You look like you've seen a dead person. And it didn't dawn on me till the show was over and I went home at night and I got a call from my CO that my dad had passed away. And so everything just fluttered and made me realize what I was feeling that day was that he was gone and he was never coming back. And then I remembered what he told me at the airport, and so that began my military career downhill. It was only the first year, but I was already losing interest because the person that I wanted to be proud of, was now gone. Even though I had my mom, but it was more like my dad that I wanted to be to. So, and going back to my first duty station. My first duty station, like I said, was in Karlsruhe, Germany. One of the famous movies that was made there in that duty station before it got shut down was a movie called Buffalo Soldiers. Buffalo Soldiers was a movie that was actually about us, American soldiers in Germany during the late 80s. A lot of us were either given an option to join the army or go to jail. And a lot of these soldiers, when they were stationed in Germany, had a lot of drug issues, a lot of disciplinary issues. So, and there was no war at the time. And so it was a lot of disrespecting going on, people selling stuff in the black market, stuff like that. And the movie brought this out. It was kind of comic, but it was also true in a way because a lot of soldiers were killing themselves left and right, doing drugs, partying, and doing any crazy stuff just to get by. And this was how soldiers were living back in the late 80s in Germany. So the movie, when it came out in 1991, it flopped big time because the movie came right around 9/11. And and everybody was patriotic at the time. The movie, on the other hand, was just the opposite. It was not patriotic. When you see the movie, when it first shows, you see a bunch of soldiers in their BDUs marching on top of a U.S. flag. When the camera pans up down to the soldiers marching, they're marching on top of the U.S. flag. And even though the movie was a flop, but I think it really gave out a true sense of what was going on with soldiers back in the late 80s and how they were really feeling was very and unpatriotic at the time. But then, like I said, the movie came out in 9/11 and it just flopped. But that was my first permanent duty station immortalized in that movie. So I'm happy that I can actually still see memories of my first duty station in that movie. So why am I still going on with this? Because guess what? In 2004, I was married. I was still married to my wife. I was planning to move back to the States because I moved back to the islands back in 1990 when my mom and I and my daughter went to the islands to live there because there was a hurricane happened in American Samoa back in the 90s. So it was there I met my wife in 95, but in '04, after I had about, I can't remember, a few kids at the time. I can't remember how many I had. But I decided to move my family back to the United States. And I didn't have a job at the time. I was still back in the islands. And I said, you know what? I think it's a perfect time to jump back in the military. And especially since the war has started getting big, and this was 2004. Of course, 9/11 happened in 2001. So, you know what? I wanted to come back in the military. I wanted to be part of the war that's going on. I wanted to help my comrades who were going through with the war thing. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna try it. So I tried it. I came back in as a reservist. And as a reservist, we came in American Samoa. We trained in Hawaii in Schofield Barracks. And so we trained till late 2004. I got orders to go to Iraq the first time. So my first, as a reservist and as first time deployed was in Iraq in '04, '05. I deployed with the Samoan unit, and the company was called 793rd at the time, engineer company. And the soldiers consisted of many soldiers from the California, Hawaii, a lot of that area soldiers. We had some soldiers from Alaska, one from Missouri. And so we had a variety of soldiers, but the majority of the soldiers were American Samoans. So the other soldiers from different states had to, how you call it, get used to our unit because it was majority American Samoan. So a lot of things were done differently to the point where they saw a lot of our cultural differences. They saw a lot of the way we did things because this was mostly in Hawaii. And they saw that when we party or when we eat, it's not like a little food. We're talking about a whole, what do you call it, luau of food. So that was very hard for them to get used to, seeing all this food, and we feed them till they drop. And they were appreciative of that fact too, but they were also not very appreciative because sometimes they were not very used to being close. And as our culture, we're very close people, and we, even though we may not know each other from Jack, we greet each other like we're brothers and sisters if we see each other from different units and stuff like that. And sometimes some of our fellow soldiers would ask us, do you know him? I said, no, but you talk like you know him. Oh, because he's Samoan, and that's how we treat each other, just like, we're family. And they said, man, I wish I had your culture because you guys are so close. Say, well, oh, you treat us good, we're fine. You treat us bad, yeah, that's you're gonna get there. But that's one thing I appreciate about my American Samoan culture is the people are very close and loving, but once you get them on the wrong side, yeah, you don't want them getting on the wrong side. But so that was my first also experience with an American Samoan unit, and because I was raised in the United States, and I would normally do things American-wise. So a lot of them saw me as I always hung around with the other soldiers, and so it's the only reason is that I'm not used to, you know, I was not used to growing up in American Samoa. So a lot of things that the traditional stuff I was not aware of, and I was also being learned that too. So so when we deployed to Iraq in '04, um, one thing that I did mention was I quit smoking before I got married. So my kids never seen me smoke. Um, the first year, the first day in Iraq, I started smoking. It was just the weirdest thing. And I don't think it was the stress from being away. I think it was, I mean, going to Iraq, I think it was more the stress of my wife and kids being by themselves back in the island. And my wife couldn't understand that. She said, why would that? I said, because it was you. You are my everything. And I guess we were not in a very good situation when I left. And of course, our situation then was my wife and I were both at fault for fooling around. And so we were trying to get over the hurdle here. But the deployment just made it a little bit more um, harder because now we're apart and we don't understand what's going on with the other. And there's a lot of suspicious minds going around when we're deployed. So that was some of the issues that I had to deal with when I deployed the first time was my wife didn't trust me on what was going on. And of course, I didn't trust her back home either. And since it was our first deployment. And we deployed to an area called Fob Danger in Tikrit, where Saddam is from. Um, it was one of the weirdest deployment. Of course, it's my first deployment, and we all we were there for was mostly securing certain areas and helping out building structures and stuff like that for soldiers to live in back in the different bases. So as a carpenter, that's what I mostly did when I came back in the military this time. Um, we did a 11-month deployment, and like I said, it was very close knit. Um, we had the governor of American Samoa's daughter was with us, and she was a very strong soldier. And when there was an incident that happened that we were I was called a TC. A TC is someone who sits on the right-hand side of the driver. I'm the one that guides the driver on where to go or to let them know if everything is okay. I'm the one that checks on the soldiers in the back of the vehicle too. The driver, all he has to do is drive. But I'm the one that helps and guides everything that goes on in the vehicle. So we were going to eat. This was still inside the compound. And we were going to eat. And I think, yeah, we ate and we came back. And just when I was about to close the cab with the soldiers in the back, my driver went and sat in the front. I saw some weird smoke about, I'd say about a good 50 yards away from our vehicle, and it was just the weirdest smoke I've never seen before. Then all of a sudden, we heard something just hit next to our vehicle, and so our E7 Sergeant First Class that was in the vehicle told us to get out of the vehicle. So I opened up the cab again and let everybody jumped out. And he told everybody to get out and get down. So everybody got out and got down. My driver was still in the vehicle. I don't think he heard everybody getting out. And me and another soldier we jumped to the right of the vehicle, if I can remember. We jumped and got down. So while we were getting down and we heard all the commotion, everybody was supposed to lay still. and the soldier next to me was yelling out medic. And, normally when you say that during a training exercises, he needs some medical attention. So he's yelling out medic, and I'm like, dude, stop playing around. This is the real thing. And unbeknownst to me, he was really serious about it. And he kept yelling medic, and I was just, all of a sudden, I started seeing blood seeping from his chest area. And I went in shock at the same time. So after a while, my uh, Sergeant First Class yelled at certain medics to come and help our soldier there that was injured. So they took him in the vehicle ambulance, and while we tried to collect everybody else there, and everybody else moved away from the vehicle and went underneath a barrier to protect them from any incoming rounds again. So one of my other soldiers, who was an 18-year-old kid from Alaska, he was crying like a baby, yelling out, and everybody was like, do we really need that right now? Do we really? Come on. And he was like, this was why I didn't want to join. This is not why I want to come. He was crying and everything. We felt for him, but at the same time, we had to brave it up and suck it up and say, this is going to be happening. We were supposed to expect this something. So we tried to calm him down. The governor's soldier was there too as well. She was helping out with trying to calm everybody, a lot of the soldiers down. But I didn't realize that my driver was still in the vehicle, so they went and got him too. He was injured on the side of his neck. I don't know how bad it was, but there was blood in that area. So he was one of the soldiers that, together with the one that was next to me, him and the soldier next to me got a Purple Heart later on down the line. We had another fellow soldier who was walking around. He didn't realize what was going on, but in the back of his neck was blood, and he didn't realize that until we told him. But when he found out, he just fainted and fell. So those were 3 soldiers that got Purple Heart. The only thing I didn't get a Purple Heart, but I got my boot was singed from one of the shrapnels, and it just touched the tip of my heel. It did not injure my heel, but in the boot you can see the shrapnel going there, and there was little blood spurts in the back of my back. But other than that, that was one of my first experiences of wartime situation in Iraq the first time, and it was frightening at the same time. It was it just warned us to be much more alert, even though we're not outside the wire, but we still have to be careful being in there. So that was one of my first experiences in my first deployment in Iraq to Crete. My second deployment was, this was after I joined the active army at the time. After I got out, when we went back in my American Samoa unit back in 05, I stayed in Hawaii for close to, I can't remember how many months, but my wife was pregnant at the time with our last kid. And I had to stay in Hawaii to make sure that all of my medical stuff was situated before I got out. And I did not want to get out without any them checking out my injuries. So I lucked out at the time because right at the time they were offering reserve soldiers if they want to go in active duty. And I said, I think this is a God's calling here. I might as well try it. So I did, and sure enough, I was accepted to become active Army at the time. So I told my wife that I've just signed up a contract to become active Army now. I'm going to be resigning from my reserve unit when I get back home. So she was happy, at the same time not happy, because we were leaving American Samoa, and I told her this is a great opportunity for our kids to move to the United States. So I got out in, was it 90, 05, right? So '05, I got out of the reserves, and in '06, I was PCSing to Fort Stewart, Georgia. That would be my first United States prime permanent duty station. I've never been permanent duty station in the United States, but Georgia, Fort Stewart, Georgia was going to be my first one. So in early '06, um, I went home after I got out from the reserves. I went to visit my wife and kids, and then my wife gave birth to my daughter around April timeframe. Uh, May, June timeframe, I had to leave to go to Georgia and to for my permanent duty station there. So I had to leave my wife again and kids because now it was a whole different ball game, and I had to go prepare things there in Georgia for her and the kids. So late '06, they came over and we began our life as a permanent duty station family in Georgia. So we were in Georgia from '06, '07, '08, '09. Yes, we were, and same job I did in the reserves as a carpenter. I was under the uh, first engineer brigade in Fort Stewart, Georgia, and they were known as the Rock of the Mark. And um, excuse me. Um, so we were stationed there in Georgia, and I deployed one time with the Georgia unit to my second Iraq tour. This time was in Ramadi, Fab Ramadi, and before we got there, the area was pretty heavily fortified with a lot of craziness. But when the third ID, that's the um, unit I was under in Georgia, when we got there in early '07, um, there was a lot of tension, but the the brigade helped calm a lot of the situation there in Far Ramadi. And that was also one of my first time that we had a surge, a 15-month surge. So what was supposed to be a year deployment turned out to be a 15-month surge. And the bad thing about it was our family knew beforehand, before we did, that we were going to be uh, on a 15-month surge through the news. And a lot of us didn't like that, but what can you do? So we were in Ramadi. My job in Ramadi was to, this time my job was different. All I had to do was build map charts, tables, chairs, beds for soldiers' living quarters and stuff like that, which was pretty simple. And um, the unit I was with was a pretty good unit because we were part of the battalion, and there were a lot of um, craziness, but we didn't lose anybody, thank God. And I think that was my last time in Iraq, and the experiences that I had there this time was a little different because we actually met civilian people there, um, civilian Iraqis. We had Iraqi soldiers, soldiers that were born in Iraq, but they were U.S. soldiers. There was a little um, difficult there because we didn't know where their how you call it, alliance lied most of the time, because they were hired just to become translator, and they were promoted pretty quickly because of the chances that they took to become soldiers. These soldiers they were never when they deployed, their name tags had to come off because they didn't want to identify themselves um, to the locals. who their families were. Well, these two soldiers, everything was okay towards the end when we couldn't find these soldiers and they were trying to hide out. They didn't want to leave with us. And that was one of the weirdest things. And we had to report because they did not want to come back to the United States. And that was one of the crazy experiences that I had there was actually that they they were happy to be helping the Americans at the same time. They were also very sad that they couldn't help out their people as much. And but where their alliance lied, I was very unsure, and I had to be careful with that because we also had American soldiers' safety too as well. And so that was one of the conflicts that we had to deal with was soldiers that were Iraq descent or Middle Eastern descent. We had to make sure that where their alliance was true to the American flag. So that was in '07. We got back to Georgia, and I was got orders to leave there and to transfer to somewhere else. But so they gave me an option because I was about to finish my second enlistment. They told me if you want to go to Hawaii or anything like that. I chose to go to Hawaii, but they didn't. They gave me Fort Lewis, Washington, Joint Base Lewis and McChord is what they call it. My first sergeant calls it Jablam because it's spelled JBLM, and I liked how he used it. It was Jablam. And so before I was supposed to station there, I had to go to Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, for 1 year. And I said, yes, I would love to go to Cuba. And that is one of the rarest duty stations that a soldier, Army soldier can get into. And also at the time, Guantanamo Bay was one of those pretty big on the news with what was going on in Guantanamo Bay. So it was an opportunity that I'm glad I had a chance. And before I went there, though, I had to take my family and move them to Washington State. So I took them to Washington, and I got them settled there in Washington. And my wife had a sister who lived there with our oldest daughter, and so they got settled down. And then afterwards, I went to Cuba for 1 year. My experiences in Cuba was this time it was a whole different turnaround from what was going on in Iraq. In Iraq, we were taught that the enemy, you had to be careful. You had to use ROE when you're dealing with the enemy. This time, the enemy was right there in your face, and you could not do anything to the enemy. The enemy can cuss you out, say any racist remarks. They can throw. This is the prison, all right? So they can throw crap at you, feces and what do you call it, saliva or urine. You cannot retaliate. You have to just grin and leave it. Because if you retaliate, your military career is on the line. So it was very hard for a lot of the soldiers that were now in Cuba. Cuba, because the ROE has changed. We had to make sure that we abide by the new rules on how to deal with the prisoners. My job there was the same as well. I was a carpenter as well, but I was more of we maintained the premises of the prisoners. We fixed whatever things they needed inside the prison. Sometimes a lot of the prisoners would stuck water bottles in their toilet to get it jammed in there just to get our attention and just to make us come way early in the morning to get and I had that experience of getting a water bottle out of the toilet because they stuck it in there because they had nothing better to do. This time, dealing with the enemy was different. I really didn't want to deal with him because it was difficult because, of course, some of them were very manipulative too, and a lot of them were very educated. And it's surprising a lot of them were educated here in the United States. And some of them were very conniving to the point where they were trying to have you see their point of view and their what's going on in their situation in their lives. And some of them sound convincing, but at the same time, I had to realize and wake myself up that this is the enemy, and this is a whole different ballgame. So what should I do? So what I did was I just let the soldiers who were military police, because I was not a military police, I was just there to make sure that their living quarters were taken care of and stuff were were done for them. And we catered a lot to their needs, but I could not understand why they went on hunger strikes, why they didn't apply by some of the rules that were giving them, because we gave them a lot of freedom, but still they didn't like it. But it was a different experience too as well. But I think the weirdest experience that I had most of the time was deployed was I felt the spirit of the God with me during that whole time. It seems like every time I deployed, it was like God was there the whole time telling me, I'm here. Don't worry about it. Just do your job and go home. So in Cuba, like I said, it was a vacation in a way because it was on a tropical island. It was also on a Navy duty. It was a Navy station, and Air Force or Navy station are Army dream because everything was done differently. Um, when I was there um, in Cuba, the soldiers, we were living in like an apartment type setting. There were like four-man room on the top, second floor. On the bottom were uh, kitchen, living room, um, laundry facilities, and stuff like that in the bottom. And four men shared this. So when I first got to Cuba in '09, the first weekend I got there, a lot of the some of the soldiers told me that your island, did you hear about your island? I said, what are you talking about? I said, on the news. I said, what are you talking about? Sure enough, when I got there the weekend, they told me that there was a tsunami. A tsunami hit American Samoa when I got there. And it just, now I was praising the Lord and thanking God because I was planning to take my kids back to the islands before. That was one of the choices I had to take my kids back to while I go to Cuba. But luckily, my wife was adamant she wanted to stay in Washington. But the tsunami in American Samoa was very bad to the point where a lot of the kids that walked to school that morning, where some of them were swept away from the water during that tsunami incident. And I remember my daughter walking to school, and had my daughter been there, she would have probably been one of the victims. But I'm so thankful that they did not go back to the islands. So that was my first weird incident in Cuba during my first weekend there. But um, Cuba was, like I said, a vacation spot to the point where there was a lot of iguanas in the daytime. But at nighttime, there was this animal called a banana rat. It's not really considered nasty behavior like a rat, but it was more like what is it? I can't describe it, but it's a weird. They call it a banana rat because it looks like a rat, but it's not. It's more cuter than a rat, but it only comes out at nighttime. And the poor animal is very, I'm not going to say stupid, but very not intelligent because once it sees lights, instead of running away from the light, it runs to the light. And so in the morning time, you see a lot of the casualties, but the system of how they do things there was we were not supposed to take the deceased animal or the carcasses away they have the birds, the what do you call it, the buzzards for that, and that's how they, I guess, economize their way there in Cuba. Um, like I said before, Cuba was one of those duty stations that it was weird because you have this duty station in a what do you call it, in a land that's it's not um, I can't remember the name of the word for it, but it it's one of those countries that are not part of the American. So it's weird that Cuba would be right smack in the middle of you know, but we were there, and I did a year there, and it was a privilege to be there because I got to serve along Marines, Air Force medics, and Navy medics too as well, and it was great. It was fun, and I miss it because you never get an opportunity to do that again if you ever get a chance. So I did 1 year there, and then I went back to Washington. In Fort Lewis, Washington, I was there for from '09 to 10, 11, 12, 13, to 2014. And same same job, but this time I've climbed up the ladder, became a buck sergeant, and we deployed to Afghanistan in 2013. This was my first time ever deploying to Afghanistan. We moved. We were in Fob Sharana, and our job in Fob Sharana was to tear down a lot of the where the soldiers lived and stuff like that, because now we were drawing down the war, and a lot of the things had to be taken down and stuff like that. So that was mainly our job at the time. Um, I got to work with a lot of great people there, a lot of soldiers, and this time the tour was a little different because that's all we concentrated on. Even though safety reasons and stuff like that, and we still had to look out for IED and stuff like that, but it was mostly tearing down and seeing the memories of soldiers, military people that were there before have now become nothing but memories of these places where soldiers used to live. And and of course, a lot of the soldiers were uh, had passed away. One of the great things that happened when we were there, before we left, there was, I think, an incident that happened in one of the airports, and we weren't there, but a lot of people were injured. But in Afghanistan, it was totally different from Iraq. The smell, um, the people, it seems similar, but they're so different in many ways. Um, if I had a choice between Iraq and Afghanistan, I think I would rather go back to Iraq. I guess I don't know. The Afghanistan was more mountainous, whereas Iraq was flat. The Even though the smell was pretty bad in Iraq, but I'd rather be in a flat surface than a mountainous area. Um, and so we did a year there in Afghanistan, 2013, and then we came back, and then I stayed in Fort Lewis till 2014, and I got orders to go to Fort Leonard Wood. Fort Leonard Wood was my birthplace where I took my basic training in AIT, and when I went transferred back over there, um, it was a blessing in disguise. At the same time, it was a lot of memories of being back in the basic training and stuff like that. Of course, because it's a training base, and this time, what my mission or my job was to help out in the battalion in training a lot of new soldiers coming up in the different type of military careers. We had carpenters, we had electricians, we had plumbers, all under our battalion. We also had divers. We also had firemen, and they were all stationed in different areas of the United States. Some were in Texas, uh, some were in Florida. That's where the divers were. And I had an experience of going there. We drove there to Florida, and I'm not a water person. I don't like swimming, but we got a chance to train with the divers. And I tell you, I just stuck on the way on the side of the pool and just waddled my way through. It was just no, I couldn't do it. But it was a nice. I was just amazed at the career that the military can get you through is one of the divers. And another experience was with the firemen, and they were in. I don't remember which state they were in, but also the plumbers and electricians. But then going back to Fort Leonard Wood, um, that's where I got out of the military. My was not doing very well. I kept gaining weight, and it's funny that when I'm away from my wife, I lose weight, but when I'm with her, I can't lose the weight. But so my military career ended there in Fort Leonard Wood in 2016. And 2016, we decided to, because the military had put me out already, and we decided where we're going to go live, whether we go stay with my family in California or my wife's family in Washington, Oregon area. And mind you, it was right around the same area, but she didn't want to go to my family. I didn't want to go to her family. So we compromised and asked God, where do you want us to go? And we ended up in Texas. Out of all places, Texas. I didn't have family. I didn't have relatives. I did not know anything about Texas. But the reason that we got here was my wife at the time was taking CTC courses in Missouri. And so, and for some reason, something kept pointing us to Texas. And I told her, you know what, why don't we just move to Texas then, since um, she's not very familiar with online courses. Maybe she can actually take actual uh, student teacher type, And she liked that, and that's how we ended up here in Texas was because of Central Texas. And long story short, that's how we ended up here. And so we've been living here since 2016, and I've loved it ever since. The reason why I like this area mostly is because of my military family here, and you get that military um, feeling all around the Fort Hood, Killeen area. And of course, with the craziness that just went through with on post with the soldiers but other than that, the neighborhood where I live is mostly retired or active duty member, and I still kind of feel safe, like I'm living on post. But that's why I like living in this area is because of a lot of military personnel. And it's weird that my family is all the way in California, but I'd rather live in my military family because I feel the sense that we all know what we went through. We all know our craziness, and we can um, we can handle that. And that's one thing I'm still stuck in this area. My wife wants to. She's living in Washington right now, but she wants us to move back there. I said no. I'm fine with where I'm at. I know this crazy winter Texas it's crazy, but still, I'd rather be here in Texas than anywhere else. And so, military-wise, I I'm glad I had the opportunity to come back in the military after being out 14 years. And I tell you, when I got out in 1990, first time, and I stayed out till 2004, the military was a whole different ball game back then in the 80s. And when I came in the 2000, it was a whole different time military. And when I recently got out, it was a whole different military. And the military has not, I mean, has changed quite a bit in just the last 5, 10 years. Is it good? Good? I do not know. But all I know is that I'm glad that I had a chance to serve my fellow Americans, and I'm proud to say that I serve. It's because not only of serving the American people, but because of the the, the camaraderie or the fellowship that we have with each other, and understanding each other through what we go through. And I still use that many times over my life on how I treat people, and because and people like to be treated, kindly, and if you treat them with respect, you get that back. Of course, most time that doesn't happen, but hey, um, other than that, and even though I did not retire um, from the military, I recently got out of reserves in 2019. I was doing reserves in Austin. I I wish it was here in Fort Hood, but it was in Austin. I did the same military career as I did in throughout as a carpenter, but I was serving in Austin. I got out in 2019, and but I've been working at the VA since 2017. So this is another what do you call it, thing that I loved about being in the military is that I now get to serve them at the VA temple, and I get to meet all different types of veterans from different parts of life, whether it be World War II, Vietnam. It's Vietnam is the most of the military people that I really look at, and because they're still not quite there yet, and but I feel for them because of we know what they went through, which I didn't go through, but I'm just privileged and special to see them and treat them with respect, and any other military personnel for that matter. But that's one thing that I'm giving back now is to serve as, at Temple VA is giving back to my military family, and I think that's it.
That's awesome.